Well, good morning, everyone. We are here once again for the stewardship workshop for our SEC virtual camp meeting 2021. And we're so happy to have you here today. For the past couple of days, we've covered uh, questions on tithing. We also have looked at offerings, specifically local church offering or local church budgets yesterday, and we had interviews with Sister Candy Lyson, our SEC treasurer, and also with Nana Boni, our internal auditor on those two occasions. Today we have a special guest with us. We have Pastor um, Paul Lockham, who is our Trans-European Division Stewardship Director. And he will be covering on mission offerings. I believe it is so important for our membership here at the SEC to understand what mission offerings are for, how do we get involved on the different mission projects, and also how can we best support the different mission fields. And so it is good to have somebody from the division who is actually a part of the GC. It's GC here in Europe, isn't it? So um, before we start, maybe I could just ask you to bow your heads for a word of prayer, and then after this, I will give the time to Pastor Paul Lacam. Lord God, Heavenly Master, we come to you with grateful hearts. We just ask your presence to be with us, be with Pastor Paul, oh God, as he present to us your word and this wonderful different thoughts on how we could be involved as part of your church in the missions of your church. Thank you, Jesus, for loving us, and thank you for your promised presence. For this we all ask in your loving name. Amen. Pastor Paul?
Thank you, Pastor Todd. I will start to share my screen, all being well. And can you see that?
Yep, that's
great. So I will start to talk. So today I'm going to be talking about mission offerings. And just in case you don't know, I suppose I ought to let you know where I'm coming from. Pastor Todd has said I'm currently working as part-time Stewardship Ministries Director for our division, the Trans-European Division, which is just up the road from the South Indian Conference in St. Albans. But I'm not there. I actually live in Nicosia in Cyprus. Prior to moving here in 2019, I was the Associate Secretary at the British Union. Before that, I was the Executive Secretary at the British Union. And some of you may even remember that before that, prior to 2011, I was the South England Conference Executive Secretary. My home conference is the South England Conference, although I've spent less time working in my home conference than I have working in other places around the British Union. So it's a great pleasure to be able to join you today to actually talk to my home field about the missions offerings. And some of you may recognize the picture that I've put up there on my opening slide, Mission Youth and Adult Mission Quarterly. This is the cover of the current Mission Story Quarterly for our current quarter. And I suppose I ought to have produced a little quiz to ask how many of you know where the offering's going this quarter, but we'll get to that in a minute. So by way of introduction, and this is where I always find my slides don't work. Here we go. By way of introduction, and the picture on the right-hand side of the screen is actually the Children's Missions Quarterly. So if any of you work with the children's departments in church, this is where the stories for the children's mission stories come from. And I want to just give you a little bit of a background as to why we have these mission stories and why each quarter we have a missions project and why each Sabbath in Sabbath school we actually talk about collecting a missions offering. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is actually built on mission. Our commission comes from Jesus, who, as it says in Mark 16, verse 15, gave us the mandate to go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. And really, that is true for every single one of us, wherever we are, sharing God's love with our neighbors, with our work colleagues, with our fellow students at university, even as children in our classrooms at school. That is our purpose. And our missions offerings, as I've put here, are a bit like the fuel that propels every aspect of outreach. Without income, our best efforts are actually hampered when it comes to providing support and finance for things. So in Sabbath school, and those of you who are a little older like me may remember some of these better than others of you who are a bit younger. In Sabbath school, there are actually 4 offerings. Yes, 4. The first of these offerings is
there we
the
go.
weekly
Mental health and minorities, this is what we are looking at today.
That's better. We had something interrupting me there, my train of thought. So in Sabbath school, the one that we are most used to is the weekly mission offering. Every Sabbath, during Sabbath school, we have the mission story, or we have a video from Mission Spotlight, or we may even watch a video from Mission 360 Degrees, and then we take up the collection. And those funds are recognized as general conference funds. They are transferred from our local church to the conference, to the union, to the division, and eventually arrive at the general conference. And those weekly mission offerings are used to fund what's known as the World Mission Budget. And we'll go into a little bit more detail in that in a few minutes. The other Sabbath school offering, which we're quite familiar with, is the 13th Sabbath offering. And this is the one that actually goes to fund the various projects that we read about in our mission story each week, or see the monthly Mission Spotlight video about. And on the 13th Sabbath, the offering that is collected, again, goes from our local church to the conference, to the union, to the division, and eventually goes to the general conference. And 25% of what is collected on the 13th Sabbath is then set aside for the specific projects that we've been hearing about all quarter. 25% of the 13th Sabbath offering. It's really important to remember this. So the weekly mission offering goes to fund the World Mission Budget. 25% of the 13th Sabbath offering goes to the special projects, and the other 75% goes into the pot that funds the World Mission Budget. Then we have 2 other offerings that are taken up in Sabbath school or are associated with Sabbath school. The first of them is the Sabbath School Investment Fund. And this is where a a pot is used in the local church and people take some money from that pot and they invest it in a project at home, and hopefully, like the parable of the talents, their £5 becomes £10 or £7.50 or at least £6. And at some point during the quarter or even during the year, the investment returns are brought back to church, and the profit on those investment funds is sent, you've got it, from the local church to the conference, to the union, to the GC. And those funds again are primarily used to help fund the world mission budget. But like the 13th Sabbath offering, a proportion of them, in this case, 22.5% of these funds, is sent back to the local divisions for frontier outreach and/or large city evangelism. So some of the investment funds actually come back to our division and are used by our division to fund outreach in the unions or conferences of our division, either in frontier outreach where where there isn't a work already, or in large city evangelism. And just as an example, some of you may remember a few years ago, there was a very big campaign in Dublin that was funded by the British Union and the Irish Mission in conjunction with each other. And part of the funding for that outreach came from the Large City Evangelism Fund. The final offering, which doesn't really get much publicity anymore, a bit like the Sabbath School investment, is actually the birthday and thank offerings. And again, I wonder if you've heard of them in your local congregations, but this is an opportunity for members to give back an offering out of gratitude, simply out of gratitude that they've had a birthday, or because they've had something happen in their family that they want to give thanks for. And you've got it, money that is brought as birthday and thank offerings is sent from the local church to the conference, to the union, to the division, and goes to the general conference, and is used again to help expand the cause of missions around the world by being used in the world mission budget. How did all of this start? Let's go back and do a little bit of history. In the early days of the Adventist Church, most Seventh-day Adventists lived in North America. That was just a fact. That's because that's where the church started. And in the early days of the organization of the church, weekly Bible study groups came together under the umbrella of the Sabbath School Association of Seventh-day Adventists. And it was in the first quarter of 1885 that the Oakland, California Sabbath School gave all of its income to help support the work of establishing a church in Australia. That was the opposite side of the world. But the Oakland, California church had a connection because one of their members had been sent as a missionary to Australia. And so they were helping to fund that mission work. Later in 1885, the Upper Columbia Conference started to give all of the Sabbath School donations to missions. So they funded, they directed their Sabbath School collection to the General Conference organization so that it could be used to fund missions. They didn't say it had to go to the Australian mission. It could be just used to fund missions wherever those missions were taking place. In 1886, all of the Sabbath schools in California clubbed together to raise $700 above their expenses in one quarter for the Australian mission. And several state Sabbath school associations proposed, as a result of that, proposed to start sending part of their offerings to help establish missions. I think it's an amazing beginning. It started in one church. One group of people decided they wanted to make a difference, not just where they were studying with their friends the Bible on a weekly basis, but other places in the world. As a result of that early beginning, by 1912, oh no, I'm skipping ahead a bit too far, aren't I? In 1887, Adventist missionary John Tay returned to America from the South Pacific to share the stories of mission that he had, and notable among them was the story of the Pitcairn Islanders. And I'm sure many of you will know the story of the British frigate HMS Pitcairn that was actually subject to being taken over by some of the crew. The captain was set adrift in a small boat, and eventually the Pitcairn arrived at an island, and they scuppered the boat and they set up living there with their Polynesian wives, these British sailors who had taken to themselves Polynesian wives. And eventually, in the 1800s, the Pitcairn Island was visited and they became Seventh-day Adventists. As a result of that very exciting story that a whole island's inhabitants had become Adventists, the GC resolved to finance the building of a missionary ship that would be used to take missionaries and missionary supplies around the islands of the South Pacific. Nothing happened in 1887 or in 1888. Nothing happened towards doing anything about that ship until the Sabbath School Association decided to make the building of a missionary ship its project for the Sabbath schools in North America. And in 1 year, the Sabbath school members donated 19,000, sorry, that should have been US dollars, not euros, which was the equivalent in today's money of about £350,000. Just in 1 year, £350,000. That's just the Sabbath school members in North America. There were about 30,000 of them at the time. Can you imagine 30,000 members raising £350,000 in 1 year? The Pitcairn boat was commissioned and built and was launched in October 1890 and served for 10 years, assisting in the opening of missions in the islands of the Pacific, from French Polynesia right the way through to Fiji Islands. It took missionaries backwards and forwards between the islands. It helped bring supplies of food and books and Sabbath school studies and all of those things, and was a very, very instrumental tool in building up the membership across the South Pacific, where the membership is still very strong today. This idea of having a project for the Sabbath School associations to direct funds to became the norm in 1912. In the first quarter of 1912, the 13th Sabbath offering was dedicated in its entirety from all of the Sabbath School associations, which by then weren't just in North America, but were being established around the fledgling world movement. And they had as their project the establishment of the mission work in India. In the second quarter of 2012, it went to building a school in Kenya to serve Eastern Africa. Interestingly, that school that was established in 1912 is now the Adventist University of Eastern Africa in Kenya. From such a small beginning, that institution has grown and grown and now provides education for young Adventists from across Eastern Africa. In the fourth quarter of 1912, I don't know what happened to the third quarter. I wasn't able to find any information about what happened in the third quarter of 1912. But in the fourth quarter of 1912, the offering supported setting up a school in Del Plata in Argentina, and also a training school in Pua in Chile. And again, from those small beginnings, amazing things have happened. Today, the Colegio Adventista del Plata in Argentina houses a university with 2,500 students, as well as having an elementary and a secondary school with a total enrollment of 1,000 students, all because it started off as a mission project for the 13th Sabbath overflow offering in 2012. So that's how it all began. So let's go back to our regular Sabbath school offerings. I've already said this, but I want to repeat it. The offerings given in Sabbath school each week constitute the regular weekly mission offering. These are general conference funds. They go from our local congregation through the conference, through the union, through the division to the general conference in Washington, D.C. And they are used as part of the annual world mission budget. They fund our world mission budget. And we'll talk about what that does in a moment. From cradle roll Sabbath school right the way through to adult Sabbath school, the Adventist Church focuses on this weekly mission offering. Stories from the region that is going to benefit from the 13th Sabbath offering are available in the Mission Quarterly. And I've already said there's one specifically for children and one for youth and adults that give stories from a slightly different slant to help encourage a generous giving to our world budget offering. But those stories come from the region that is going to benefit from the 13th Sabbath overflow offering. There are other mission resources that can be used in Sabbath school to encourage generous giving for the weekly mission Sabbath school offering. As I've said, 3 times a quarter, there is a specific video from the region where the 13th Sabbath Overflow offering will be going, called Mission Spotlight. And that video is just a short, usually 5 to 6 minute video that actually talks about some of the work that goes on in the countries that are going to benefit and some of what they hope to benefit from. But there are other resources as well. There is the Mission 360 magazine, which, just like the Missions Quarterly, contains stories. But these are not stories linked to the 13th Sabbath Overflow offering. These are stories about our mission, church's mission work around the world. And each week they usually focus on a different part of the world, a different missionary project or a different missionary outreach that is taking place. And if you've never seen any of them, I really recommend that you just Google Mission 360 and you will see the resources that are available to actually show in your local church, or even just for you to view for your own interest about what our world mission budget actually funds. There are also, besides the magazine, there are Mission 360 videos, and there are actually 13 of those in each quarter, and they tell inspiring stories about our mission work around the world. There is also a mission spotlight viewed through Mission 360 TV. And again, if you just Google Mission 360, you will find those resources that can actually tell you a bit more about our work around the world. Adventist mission. And I've put a big but here. I've tried to make a distinction between the weekly mission offering and the 13th Sabbath overflow offering, as we now refer to it, because so often people misunderstand what their offerings are and what their use is. Now, I'm sure if any of you have been to any seminars that Pastor Todd has held before, you are not among those who don't know the difference. But just in case, I want to emphasize it again. The only offering that goes to the project that is shared throughout the quarter through the mission reading or the mission spotlight stories is the 13th Sabbath overflow offering. And only 25% of the offering that's collected on the 13th Sabbath around the world is actually used to fund those projects. The other 12 weeks, Sabbath school offering, and the 75% of the 13th Sabbath offering goes to support the world mission budget. And that mission budget funds mission work and administrative support around the world. And as I've just said on the previous slide, that work is highlighted in the Mission 360 magazine and videos. So personally, I think it's actually important to try and share some of those stories on the 12 weeks that are actually where our offering is actually being collected to help fund the world budget offering. The 13th Sabbath offering have actually allowed the church to build schools, dormitories, hospitals, clinics, churches, mission launches, lamb shelters, which is children's worship rooms, printing presses, and universities around the world. The 13th Sabbath offering has traditionally been used in recent decades for construction type projects. This is because although we also return tithe, a proportion of which ends up at the General Conference and is used to help fund our world mission budget, tithe cannot be used to fund building projects. It can be used to fund the salaries of missionaries, but not to missionaries and missionary teachers, and even missionary doctors, but it cannot be used to fund the bricks and mortar from which so many of those work. So the projects are usually construction projects, and you've heard about them through the Missions Quarterly. This quarter, 25% of the 13th Sabbath offering, the offering that is collected on the 29th of June, will go to fund 9 projects in the Inter-American Division. Some of those projects will be specific building of better living centers, and some of them are actually funding the program of those better living centers. But there are 9 of them across the Inter-American Division. The 13th Sabbath projects for our 13 divisions rotate, and approximately once every 3.5 years, the Trans-European Division, our division, benefits from the overflow offering. The last time our division benefited was actually just last year, the second quarter of 2020, just after the COVID restrictions hit. And by the time we got to June, most of our churches, certainly across our division and in many other divisions of our world church, were closed to meetings. And you guessed it, that influenced the 13th Sabbath overflow offering, sadly. In that first quarter of lockdown, there was lots of scrabbling about how we were going to help church members return their tithes and their offerings when they weren't actually physically in church to do so. And I know that in the British Union and specifically in the South England Conference, eventually online giving was given lots and lots of promotion, and other giving methods in some local churches were also set in motion, so that by the third quarter, the income was actually flowing again, which was great. But the second quarter of 2020, when the money came to our division, the project that benefited in the British Union was the funding of a second church building in the capital of Ireland, in Dublin. And although the project hasn't actually got underway yet, some funding has been set aside, has already been received by the division, that will go towards that project once they actually purchase the ground to get it underway. And I know they are working very hard to get that underway. In addition to the 13 Sabbath school offerings and the 4 special Sabbath school offerings that I talked about earlier, the weekly Sabbath school offering, the 13th Sabbath school offering, the investment offering, and the birthday and thank offering. There are designated by the General Conference for, oh, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. There are designated by the General Conference 4 special mission offerings. Each year, the General Conference designates 4 Sabbaths for a special mission offering. Those mission offerings are not taken up during Sabbath school, but are actually taken up during the worship service. And Pastor Todd and I have talked about this previously, because within our division, we follow the designated calendar of offerings system, which means that theoretically, on 4 Sabbaths of every year, the entire offering taken up during the worship service is designated for the purpose on that particular Sabbath. And 4 of those Sabbaths, as I've said, are General Conference Sabbaths. And the offering taken up on those Sabbaths is for a specific purpose. The last Sabbath that was a designated Sabbath for the specific GC offering, and I'm sure it didn't happen in your churches, but it may have done, because most of our churches work on a budget offering system and they decide how their budget offering is going to be used. But I don't want to get sidetracked into the worship service. But the last designated special mission offering was on the 10th of April. And it was for Adventist mission emphasis. So it was an additional offering for the world mission budget. The next one is actually on July the 11th. And you may or may not have heard about it. But on July the 11th, the offering will actually be collected as a COVID-19 response offering. And the purpose of that offering is actually to help our unions respond in a positive way to local projects for COVID response, whether it's the funding of masks or hand gels, whether it is helping people who are isolated because of COVID-19, whatever. Our division will receive a proportion of the money that is donated and passed on July the 11th. They will receive a proportion from whatever is collected across the world to actually help projects in the unions of our division. And if you as a local church have an idea about something that could be a COVID response, you are invited through your conference to put in a request for funding for a COVID response. But of course, if no money comes in from our division, we're unlikely to get any money back. And I'm sure Pastor Todd has previously talked to you about the funding of some of these special project offerings. The next offering date after July the 11th will be September the 12th, and that's called an unusual opportunities offering. And again, this is a fund that is divided up around the world, is a fund that is held at the division level and is open for local churches, local groups, local conferences, local missions, even local unions to request support for some unusual opportunity. When something that is unusual comes about. So a few years ago in the South England Conference territory, the Olympics was held. That was an unusual opportunity. And some of the funding for some of the things that took place from the South England Conference and local churches to actually reach out to people at the Olympics in London came from the Unusual Opportunities Fund. So bear that in mind when you give offerings. And maybe if your local church works on a budget system, suggest on September the 12th that some of the money be set aside for the Unusual Opportunities offering. The last of those 4 special mission offerings for this year is actually an annual offering. It's the annual sacrifice offering, and many of our churches actually promote this offering. They may even fund it through the budget. And if your church does that, great. If it doesn't, I would suggest you really think about it and see if you can't do it. This annual sacrifice offering is meant to be something that we think about to give back sacrificially. It actually encompasses the original purpose of those first mission offerings back in 1885. It goes to specifically support global mission pioneers. These are missionaries who go to places where there is no Adventist church, and in their everyday work, they seek to find ways to touch the lives of people and look for opportunities to share the gospel with them. Again, if you Google global mission or even go global to globalmission.org, you can actually find stories about global mission pioneers. And on this screen, you actually have highlighted Prem, who converted his living room into a clinic where he actually sought to help people in their health needs by teaching them Adventist principles of looking after their health. And as a result, a branch Sabbath school started, and from that branch Sabbath school, a congregation eventually was built up, and it now is a local Adventist church, all because of the work of a global mission pioneer that was funded from the annual sacrifice offering. You may have heard of Adventist Frontier Adventist Frontier Missions. They are a supporting ministry that work on the same idea as global missions, and we have actually benefited from the work of an Adventist Frontier missionary in the British Union. Again, it was in the Irish mission, down in the city of Cork, where Adventist Frontier missionary worked for a number of years, again, as a health-related missionary. And today, we actually have a church congregation in the city of Cork and a congregation who now have a church building, which was a former synagogue, incidentally, there in the city of Cork. So annual sacrifice offering is, again, a very important way to help fund the work of our global mission work. Many people ask how much they should give in Sabbath school. And again, I hope Pastor Todd, if any of you have been to his seminars before, will have underlined that all of our giving, our free will offerings, should be based on how God has blessed us. We should give in proportion to what our increase is. Sadly, many of us give out of habit. We put a £5 note in the offering plate, and we've given a £5 note in the offering plate for the last 8 years. Now, that's a good thing that we're giving £5 in the offering. But actually, over the last 8 years, the value of £5 has changed. And the proportion that £5 is of our income has gone down and down and down. And while we're still giving, the proportion that we're giving has decreased, related to how God has blessed us. So I would really recommend to you that you choose what percentage of your increase you are going to give as a free will offering. And then you divide up that percentage of your increase that you're going to give as a free will offering to Sabbath school, 13th Sabbath, budget, and any other charitable giving that you want to fund. The General Conference suggests that 20% of your personal offerings should be assigned to mission offerings. That's whether they are through the weekly mission offering or the 13th Sabbath offering or those 4 special offerings. Now, obviously, Sabbath school investment and birthday thank offerings are in addition to what you ordinarily set aside as your offerings. So think about how you give in church. For every £10 that you give, is £2 going into Sabbath school and £8 into your budget? Or is £8 going into Sabbath school and only £2 going into your budget? Think about it. The whole world is contributing to our world offering, our world budget, but only you are contributing to your local congregational budget. Interestingly, if you feel touched by the stories of global mission and you give proportionately in your offerings and want to increase the proportion you give in Sabbath school, then your total proportion increase will benefit all the offerings you give. And whenever your salary increases and you give a percentage of your increase in proportion to that increase, you are giving proportionately more across all of the offerings. How do we put a price on what God has given us? Yes, we have to be sensible and we have to budget. We do have to budget because our pocket is not without limit. But if God has blessed you with health and strength so that you can earn an income, why should you not dedicate a set percentage of that back to him, just as you already recognize that a percentage of your increase is God's, and that we call tithe. 10% of our increase is tithe. If we make an additional 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, some people even go to another 10% of their increase for offerings. Do we not expect that God will multiply the rest to cover our needs? Of course, sometimes we think, oh yeah, but I want this and I want that. But the question is, do we need those things? We have to ask ourselves, God has given us life. How are we going to use our life for him? That's the sermon over. Let's go to a summary. The weekly Sabbath all offerings support the World Mission Program of the church. They help fund the salaries of our mission doctors, our mission teachers, our missionaries. They help support the supplying of goods in hospitals and schools. They help support the outreach of missionaries in all places of the world. 25% of the offering given on the 13th Sabbath of each quarter goes to fund the mission projects, those projects that are promoted through the Mission Story Quarterly and the Mission Spotlight videos. Those projects are usually building projects or conversion projects to make places suitable for specific outreach programs, which will then be funded as part of the World Mission budget. And then there are the special offerings that are taken up during the worship service for 4 specific mission opportunities each year. This year, on July the 11th, that will be the COVID-19 response. On September the 12th, it will be the unusual opportunities. And on November the 14th, it will be the global pioneer missionaries. So all of these are funded through our mission focused offerings, and they come from your generous giving. I've probably done enough talking. You've probably heard a lot that has caused some questions in your mind. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Pastor Todd to ask if there are any questions that you want either him or me to be able to try and answer at this time.
Thank you so much, Pastor Paul. That is such a wonderful presentation. It's an eye opener. Actually, even for me, there's this part there that I didn't know that only 25% actually goes for the project itself. I thought because I've been in the Philippines, and in the Philippines, only half of those goes to the project.
Yeah.
And when I came here, pastoring churches here, I thought it's the whole 13th Sabbath goes to the project. But as far as I know, yes, all Sabbath school offerings goes to mission budget. Nothing is left. Nothing is left at the South England Conference. Nothing's left at the BUC. Nothing's left in the division, but it all goes to the mission project, and that is very, very good. So I think one of the questions that was in the chat a while ago was probably Sister Ellen. I hope you could. Was already answered because I think when you asked this, Pastor Paul haven't mentioned the uses of the weekly Sabbath school offerings yet. So I hope that has been answered already. But if there's any other questions, probably you could either type it on the chat, or you could probably open your mic and ask the question. It's now time for our question and answer portion. All right. So, Pastor, since no one has been making a signal yet, let me just ask the, because on the we usually have this one is for last year, the Titan reading offerings. We all
Yeah.
usually have this Titan reading offerings sent to churches. For this year, I did not intend to, I did not print any because of the COVID, and most churches are actually closed, and that's why we just sent the e-copy or e-book of these readings. And just a note on that, the July 10th special offering is because on the booklet it says Adventist World Radio, but it has been changed to COVID response,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so it has been changed to COVID response. So that's just a clarification on that. And oh, the 10th of April, is that, did that still went to the Hope Channel or any, because it's Hope Channel that is mentioned there. That's why.
Yeah, I believe it did go to Hope Channel
Okay.
on the 10th
Okay.
of April.
All right. Any other question? If not,
Hi,
I will be
Pastor.
asking question. Oh yes, yes. Who's that?
Hi, it's Jinky.
Oh, Sister Jinky.
Hi. I just wanted to ask because, and thank you for your presentation, Pastor Paul. It does made a lot of clarification on some of the
Good.
things that we probably I didn't understand. Um, but the issue that I always find is that, especially for us, I'm from the FIC, which is Filipino Church, is that we find that our local church back home would personally ask donations for building churches or other projects that they may have. And come to think of it, that in our church alone, we come from different regions and different areas of the Philippines. And can you imagine having all those solicitations coming from all of different regions? And which I've sometimes what we find is that members would divert their uh, personal funds going to that projects in the Philippines, which I feel sometimes the offering actually doesn't come through
Mhm.
the church. Now, how do we address this? Because I'm sure this has been an issue, but then it seems that we may have funds that would um, funds those projects, but actually we are not reaching out as much as probably what we would have um, wanted, because it seems that when I look at the list that they have presented, it has a lot of big projects. But what about what's happening with the smaller churches in the villages? It may not be just in the Philippines, but actually the third world countries. What do we do about that one? And how do we encourage our members to actually probably divert funds here so that we could actually um, focus on the greater good of every in the world projects, I mean.
Yeah. I, I have encountered the question many times. And I want to say up front, I am not against people donating to projects that touch their hearts, and that they know their £1 that they give from the UK is worth 15 times as much back home as what it could do, in the UK. So it's really important that we don't try and say to people, don't give. What we need to do is say, look at what you get in and apportion your giving. So if you want to give, say, £100 a month in offerings, decide how much you're going to give in the local church budget, because you know what the local church needs. You know, without a local church operating budget, we actually can't run church. So actually, then you're not going to be in church. So whatever, you know, we can't actually be out reaching out without a local church budget. Then there is the Sabbath school offerings. There may even be youth offerings. You know, I mean, I'm very aware that some churches still have a separate youth offering, whereas other churches fund their youth through the budget offering. Whatever your local situation is, encourage people to look at the different pots that they want to fund and a proportion of their total £100 to those different pots and stick to it. Make it a principle, a commitment. The General Conference uses the idea of making it a promise. I promise to give 28% of my total offering pot to Sabbath school. I promise to give 52% of my total offering pot to the budget. I promise to use the remainder as I feel called to during the year. And it's then that remaining bit that they actually use to fund the appeals that they get from elsewhere. That way, they are committing to funding locally and globally, but still giving themselves an opportunity to respond to those appeals from elsewhere. I think human nature is such that if we tell people, don't fund those appeals elsewhere, then actually their total giving just goes down. If we encourage people to budget how they are going to fund and take away a little bit of the emotional response, to have it as a promise, you know, this is budget, this is Sabbath school, this is other projects that I want to fund that I will hear of, then when they get an increase in salary, their total amount of giving goes up to all of the projects that are needing funds. So that would be my answer, both to the Filipino congregation, and of course we have a Filipino congregation as part of the international congregation that I'm currently a member of here in Nicosia. So I'm very aware of the appeals that we get, and we've just been looking at funding some gift baskets to the Philippines from here. So, you know, it's not something unusual. It happens worldwide in different communities, because where our home is, our heart is, wherever we may be living.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor, for that wonderful answer. Any other question?
Yes, please, Pastor. Thank you, Pastor Paul, for the presentation. Actually, it is an eye-opener also for me. And, you know, I've been in church for a long time, but some of the things today I've heard are quite new. And I think most of us, we give offerings, but we really don't know how they are spent. I will give an example. Last month's offering, I put on my envelope about amount of money. I said Sabbath school, and then the rest I put it for offerings. Now, after this presentation, I'm wondering, how did they decide where to take the offering, because nobody has really told me that's what we decided to divide your offerings. So Pastor Paul, my question is really, so if I decide I'm giving that £100 you said for Sabbath school offerings, or I say 50 Sabbath school offerings, and then I say 50 for offerings, maybe divine, like when we used to go to church. Now we don't go, so you just write in your email £50 offerings, £50 Sabbath school offerings. How do they decide how to distribute that amount if I've not told them how to do it?
All right, if you're talking about money that you put in through the tithe envelope or online giving, where
Yes.
you are specifying £50 is Sabbath school. If you haven't specified what the offering is for, it is counted as budget offering, as far as I know.
So budget,
that's the local church budget offering. Yeah, Pastor Todd is nodding. So if you don't specify, then it's assumed it is local church funds. So it's actually very important to do specify if you are giving something for something else specifically. So for instance, I have been paying my offerings remotely for the past year. And I send to the treasurer every month, because I get paid monthly, I give my offerings and tithe monthly. I send a treasurer a breakdown by email, and I say, this is budget, this is special offering. So in the quarter where there is a special offering, I state it's for a special offering. So one of the special offerings I make sure I support, Pastor Todd, is Newbold. Because without Newbold we wouldn't have pastors, and so that's one of the things close to my heart. And then I specify Sabbath school, and I also specify 13th Sabbath.
Okay.
So I actually tell the local church treasurer that, each month I am giving something which is actually for 13th Sabbath, so that they then make sure it's accounted for in the 13th Sabbath, rather than getting lost.
Okay, thank you, Pastor. Also,
You're
you said
welcome.
about the 25% of the 13th Sabbath goes to the world mission. What about the weekly Sabbath one, the Sabbath school offering?
So the weekly Sabbath school offering funds the world budget, okay? And the world budget is used to pay teachers, doctors, missionaries, nurses. It's used to fund our mission institutions around the world. So our mission funded hospitals and clinics and schools, they are funded from the world budget.
Okay.
A proportion of it is also used to support the administrative work of our missions outreach program. So that's for 12 Sabbaths of the quarter, the entire offering taken up in the Sabbath school is the world budget offering. On the 13th Sabbath, 75% of the offering taken up also goes to the world budget offering, and 25% goes to the special projects that we've been reading about or hearing about for the quarter through the mission story.
Okay. So if I want to get to the local budget, then it should come from my offering.
Yes, from your budget offering.
Okay,
absolutely.
Budget offering. Okay,
yeah,
thank
your
you so
local
much.
budget offering.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me just give some addition or some clarification on that. For those of you who are still using your envelopes, oops, let's show well. Envelopes. In your envelopes, there's always two parts: the top part and the bottom part. The top part goes, is the tithe, Sabbath school offering, 13th offering, birthday and thanks offering, and there are two spaces there that we have left if there are any other special offerings that you would like to support on. At the bottom part is basically Oops, still, I should have, you know,
Don't
actually put
worry.
this on. Yeah, on the bottom part is the church budget. Okay, the church budget, local church evangelism, children, youth, and church building, and any other special offering that you would have for your local church. So just to probably align what we were saying here, for the past couple of days, when you send either online or through envelope, and you just put their offering, right? Offering, then that would go to church budget, local church budget. And that is, as we have mentioned yesterday, used for local evangelism, pay for bills in your local church, or pay for rent if you are renting a church building. Um, so, but if, and this is something that I think, yeah, Brother Nana and Sister Candy have also specified. But if you sent money through the conference and did not say anything, it's not offering, it's not world mission, it's not Sabbath school, then it goes to tithe directly. That's how they see it. All right. So you would need to really specify where your offering should go. And I think Pastor Paul's presentation today just have given some clarification, because people kept on asking me, why is the birthday and thanks right on the top? Why is it not on the bottom for the local church? And we believe, and I would always explain it, that birthday and thanks offering is a mission offering. If we would think about it, and just an addition, hope you please correct me if I'm misleading people here, Pastor Paul. Uh, a mission offering, world mission budget, helps finance, yeah, all those doctors, missionaries, and those clinics. There's loads
Yeah.
of money that is needed to run a clinic, just a clinic alone. Yes, there might be portion of our tithe that goes to the higher organization, but what actually goes to the GC, say like here in the South England Conference, I think only 2% of our tithe goes to the GC.
Yeah.
32% of it stays at the union and at the division. So if we would think about it, we only have what, 13 divisions? If only 13 divisions would be sending what, 2% of their, or probably 5-10% of their tithe income, it may not be enough as well to actually support all the doctors, frontier missionaries, and other workers in the different parts of the world field. So the World Mission budget, or the Sabbath School weekly offering, actually supports them, and so as the institutions that we are running around the world. Pastor, you've just mentioned, and I think I was about to ask Dot, but you've just mentioned Newbold College. All right. Um, on our booklet, okay, Newbold College is not specified there. I think for the past few years, I would always put Newbold College on, I think, the first Sabbath of February, if I'm not mistaken on that. That is when the offering for Newbold Sabbath, Newbold goes. But I think it's because um, in this booklet, it is always stated there that there are 6 Sabbath in a year that is not designated, for a specified mission offering. But I think they give, the GC give the liberty to the division, to the union, for you to designate where those offerings should go. Am I right on that, Pastor? Could you give us clarification on that?
You are absolutely right. And Newbold College was the first Sabbath in February. The union need to have a tap on their wrist for not letting you know that.
Well, I think probably every January we would be receiving emails from Newbold College saying,
yes,
the first Sabbath
yeah,
of February is designated for Newbold offering.
yes.
And I just hope churches are supporting that. But yes, maybe you've heard Sister Candy said last Monday that the SEC are actually putting a percentage of its income as well
Yeah.
for Newbold College. So, but aside from that, we could still support Newbold College an extra offering for their work.
What Newbold have actually tried to do is any money that they receive from the Newbold offering, they actually used to support students. So it's like a student support fund. Whereas the tithe appropriation that they receive is actually for the running of the college. So when we give something through the Newbold offering, we're actually more directly, if you like, helping students, particularly students if they're struggling financially. And, you know, it's close to my heart because when I went to Newbold, I was married, I had 2 children, and in my first year at Newbold, our 3rd child was born. And I almost didn't go because we found my wife was expecting. And I was granted a hardship grant by Newbold. I didn't ask for it. I was granted it because they recognized that with having a new baby, we had an extra burden that we hadn't actually, you know, necessarily budgeted for. So I've always felt that, you know, as God has blessed me, I want to try and help others back in the same way. So yeah, that's what the Newbold offering is primarily used for. It's used to help support students rather than fund the college.
Amazing, amazing. So, is there any other questions probably from our attendees today? All right. If you would just think about it, there are 52 Sabbaths in a year. Okay. And basically, the special mission funds that comes out from, you know, offerings during the worship time is, I think there's only 12 of those. Actually, even less. But of course, on a weekly basis, we have the Sabbath school offering. And yep, I think if there's no other question, I think it would be good just for us to thank Pastor Paul for the presentation today. It's amazing. I hope more people will be able to see, and watch this one, and not only be able to support their local church missions, but also the world mission. There's something that just came to my mind. If you would think about it, we would think, well, I come from the Philippines, and I know there are so many times, so many quarters that Philippines have benefited from the mission offerings. And, you know, even the school, the seminary where I graduated from, have benefited from the mission offering long time ago. And if not for that, you know, there's so many institutions that we have all around the world which couldn't have been established if not for the mission offerings. And even here in England, you know, we have such institution. So I believe it's just so wonderful that God have given our pioneers this vision on how to continue to support. And I hope probably this is the best time to say it, because some people, when I go to some churches, think that it's, you know, it's better just to give on the local church. But yes, it's wonderful for us to support the local work, but also let's think of the world mission as well. But there's one thing I have found out 2 years ago when I look at the tithe and the income of some local churches. When churches promotes mission offerings, I could also see that even their local church offering is right here, you know, because people becomes what? Generous, you know, and faithful, and grateful to what God has given them, that they see what God have blessed them as something that they should also bless other people in the local community and in the world church. And this just simply relate to our main theme, making disciples and building communities. It is through these offerings that we could support building the communities and making more disciples, not only in our local church, not only in the SEC, but even in the fields beyond us. Pastor Paul, last word?
It's like ripples, Pastor Todd. It's like ripples. You drop a stone in still water and the ripples spread out. And there's a mathematical proportion to those ripples. I could get into the science of it. I don't want to. But, we need to make a big splash locally, but the ripples go out. And if proportionately we are giving as the ripples go out, we are together having a huge effect in the world. And that's what God calls us to do, to be disciples locally where we are, but also to help the wider work across the world. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Pastor. And probably I'll come back once again to you. You still have up to September, right? I'll come back to you for another workshop, and maybe it would be good for because I'm thinking to ask you that question right now, but probably I'll do another workshop that we could send out to churches on combined budget offering and how it relates to world mission and the local mission, because I think it would be much better to have a real focus on that presentation. Okay. But since we're still not on the combined offering at the TED, probably it would be good to have that on another one session. Thank you so much. Pastor, would you be kind enough to pray for us here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's bow our heads together, shall we? Father, you are so gracious to us. Your love has no limits. Your sacrifice to make it possible for us to be counted as your children was so costly. And yet Jesus' mission here was so clear, reaching out to other people. His mission went beyond the borders of his own people to touch the lives of those in surrounding nations. And really, that's what the whole idea of mission is about. That we don't just help those near us, but those far away as well. Father, help us all to think about the influences we have. Help us to visualize the ripples of our lives, starting at home and in our neighborhoods, spreading out through our church community, through our world church, to make you and the gospel known. Father, by your Spirit, help each one of us to be faithful to you and as generous as you have been to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you once again, Pastor Paul, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This video is recorded and we will post it at the SEC website for others to view. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.